I want to take today's live stream to talk about a food movie from 20 years ago, and that movie is Supersize Me. So I found out that Morgan Spurlock, who made this movie, passed away yesterday, actually right here in upstate New York. I don't know exactly where, but it said complications of cancer. And I figured to kind of pay tribute to the film. I know there was some controversy that he had a couple of years ago, and I don't really want to go into any of that. There was recently some controversy regarding the film, which actually is part of what I want to talk about later in the stream here when we go through the film beats. But the story of this movie actually is pretty profound for me in terms of its influence on me. And from the thumbnail, it kind of coincides with when my consumption of fast food, and especially McDonald's, kind of really declined. And I'll get there as well as far as the story beats. But as far as Supersize Me, so this was a film that if you're familiar with the Albany, New York area, we have kind of the Regal cinemas. I think at the time there might have been 3 or 4 in the area, but none of them carried this movie. This was an independent film that came out in 2004, and I looked it up because I remember going around this time of year, like the spring, and it didn't come up out in those theaters, but we have an independent movie theater called the Spectrum on Delaware Avenue in Albany, where I saw this, and that was the first movie that I saw at the Spectrum. And the Spectrum is kind of a legendary theater. They had homemade popcorn with real butter. They used to have slices of cake that you could get. I think you could also get beer with while you watch a movie. So it was definitely one of those like old school, theaters where you would go to see kind of an independent film like that. And independent films and this also kind of brushes the whole content creator, YouTube, filmmaking. So there's a lot that we're going to talk about here today. Independent films in the 90s meant a very particular thing. You had movie studios that were making these really amazing, plot-driven movies like Big Lebowski, like the Coen brothers and things like that that would classify as independent films that have gained kind of a cult following. That kind of fell away in the early 2000s. And what started to happen was the rise of these documentaries. Michael Moore was one with, Bowling for Columbine, Fahrenheit 9/11 and all that. And on the scene came Morgan Spurlock, who had essentially a YouTube idea before YouTube, because I think YouTube is 2005, where he was going to go on a 30-day McDonald's fast, and he had certain rules to it, and we'll go through the rules as well, and track what happened with his health. And the resulting documentary turned out to be essentially a hit piece on McDonald's and the fast food industry in terms of its effect on America and health-wise. One thing I have to say is that none of what I'm going to talk about here today should be considered medical advice. We're talking about this as a commentary in terms of the film. The film has influenced me, in a few different ways, including, some of the ways that I used to order fast food and all that kind of stuff. So let's go into a little bit of that. In the 90s, I consumed a lot of McDonald's. I actually had a buddy in high school who frequents the live chats here, Greg, who worked at McDonald's. And every day after school, maybe not every day, but a lot of days after school, after I got my license, I would drive down to the McDonald's on Dolson Avenue in Middletown, New York, which was right across the street from my dad's deli, and get McDonald's. And the big thing then, which I still regret that they don't make anymore, was the Arch Deluxe. The Arch Deluxe was their kind of adult version of a burger. It had circle bacon. It had like a nice peppery sauce on it and a squishy bun that was a lot different than anything else on the menu. They were trying to hit a new demographic because they were starting to see sales decline. So I'd go there and I'd get my Arch Deluxe meal, and, Greg would hook me up with a bag that had cheeseburgers and chicken nuggets underneath my one thing of fries. And, it was one of those things where I think we've passed the statute of limitations in terms of that. But I ate a lot of McDonald's, and, obviously during that time I was a lot more active. And even then my weight did fluctuate quite a lot. By the time it came to 2004, when Supersize Me came out, I was in graduate school at the time, obviously trying to save money. I think I was making 21K a year. And that had included, my living expenses as a student, which 21K a year is not a lot of money. um, but it was definitely an interesting time because I started to see my own consumption of fast food declining. It was just easier to cook at home. And also, the portions were getting smaller at fast food. And I felt like it was making me more hungry after I would eat. So I stopped going to McDonald's like probably right before the movie came out. Now, the the movie didn't stop me from going to McDonald's. I mean, I generally wouldn't choose McDonald's as a first fast food restaurant to go to. If I were going to pick a burger restaurant that pretty much is everywhere, I would pick Burger King. Their Whopper is superior to the Big Mac in terms of my opinion. But recently, I think in our 2021 trip to the Outer Banks, we were driving down the East Coast to get to the Outer Banks in North Carolina. And I think somewhere in Virginia, we stopped at a McDonald's and I got a quarter pounder with cheese and was floored by the quality of it. It was very different than the hamburgers and cheeseburgers I remember eating as a kid. So occasionally I'll have a quarter pounder with cheese at McDonald's, but it's not something that I'll actively seek out. So I pretty much wasn't going to McDonald's at the time this movie came out, but what's compelling about going to see this movie at this independent movie theater with one of my good buddies, Rory, who frequents the streams here as well, is that first of all, we wanted to see a movie at the Spectrum. Second of all, we heard a lot of buzz on the internet about this movie in terms of how the idea of eating fast food every meal, 30 days, 3 meals a day. It's one of those kind of big video ideas that you'll now see on YouTube. Mr. Beast is obviously bigger than that now, but even other YouTubers will do like, oh, I stayed at this hotel for this many days, or it's a very YouTube kind of video concept. So in this movie, which is a film made by Morgan Spurlock, who is a filmmaker, and I think at the time he was a filmmaker, he goes through a bunch of trials and tribulations in terms of starting off on this 30-day all you can eat McDonald's bonanza. And I actually jotted down a few different story beats here that I want to go through. It's chronological. I watched the movie this morning to refresh my memory in terms of what it was. The one thing I will say is that in terms of how it aged, it's not exactly as profound as I remember it to be, because I think after this, it brought a lot of things into the forefront in terms of portion sizes, calorie counts, trans fats, and a lot of things that have changed in 20 years in the fast food industry. A lot of things for the better. So let's go through kind of everything here. And I'm going to say, if you need a spoiler alert on a 20-year-old movie, it's kind of silly. I mean, also as a documentary. So, I think you can kind of guess what's going to happen, but there are spoilers in here. I'm going to talk about exactly what happens in the movie, and we can kind of go from there. So if you've seen the movie, give the video a thumbs up here, and say hi in the chat or leave a comment. So the first thing I thought was interesting in terms of this film is his girlfriend at the time was vegan, and he had a last meal that was all vegan, and it's really interesting. When I opened up my DVD, you can see here, these walls here are all DVDs except for the brick right here. So I have DVDs and Blu-rays. Inside, there's actually, they have the liner art, which kind of went away around the mid 2000s. And there's also the Last Supper recipes. So these were all the things that his girlfriend made for him, his vegan girlfriend. You can even see there's a part where she's cutting up this vegan tart that looks absolutely gross in the video. But that kind of gives me one thing to comment on. And I've talked about this with live guests in the past, is that in the last 20 years, vegan food has completely revolutionized and changed. It's not this kind of brown, miserable, bowls of stuff that it used to be. Lots of different cuisines have come out to the forefront in terms of what vegan food are. I mean, there are certain cultures that are all vegan, which is something that I think at the time really wasn't as widespread as it is now. Um, Now you can even get burgers that are 100% vegan and cheeseburgers that they have vegan cheese and stuff like that. So it's a different world in terms of that whole thing. But it was very interesting how his last meal was all vegan, and some of the things that they made was a tofu and vegetable phyllo tart, roasted vegetable and quinoa salad. And I remember her describing it and looking at it and being like, "Yeah, that doesn't look very appetizing." A simple green salad, which here is listed with leafy green lettuce, extra virgin olive oil, lemon, and salt. Nothing wrong with that. That's kind of what I eat for lunch most days. Um, steamed steamed artichokes with garlic olive oil dip. Now, when I saw that artichoke, she points to it. They don't show it on camera for very long, but it looked pretty disgusting. And then there's the recipe for the garlic olive oil dip. But this is a pretty cool thing. You don't really see DVDs anymore in general, but you haven't seen kind of an insert like this, or even an insert like this with the chapters in a very long time. So that was kind of a neat little thing. Another thing I thought was really interesting about the documentary is that they show you a lot of the tech, and he even runs through how many McDonald's there were in Manhattan, and the number count actually seemed kind of low. I'm sure within that time, a lot of those restaurants and their footprint kind of increased probably exponentially. So that's kind of cool. But also the tech. One of the doctors gives him a pedometer, which is like a little thing that counts your steps. Now we've kind of migrated to Apple Watches and Fitbits and all those things that count your steps and calorie counts and resting metabolic rates and sleep schedules and all that stuff. It's kind of a different world in terms of the tech as well. I mean, you don't even see a cell phone in the movie at all. He's on landline phones the whole time. You see people on the go. There was one scene where he gets DoorDash. Well, it's not, well, I call it DoorDash, but it's like he gets delivery, and the guy has a plastic bag with the soda inside of it, and it's kind of a weird shaped plastic bag. Kind of interesting. At the beginning, they show you a Big Mac, and I thought it was interesting. The Big Mac looked like current day Burger King Whopper size bun. Now that could be the scale and the video and whatever lenses it was shot on or something, but I don't think a Big Mac is the size that it was in 2004. That's something that if you have experience with that, leave a comment or something and let me know. I actually never had a Big Mac until about maybe 10 or 11 years ago. So that's another interesting fact about me. I may look like I've smashed a lot of Big Macs in my day, but it wasn't my burger of choice. I was a Whopper guy. One of the nutritionists gives a talk about portion sizes and how you can't find a restaurant that has the recommended portion size of a protein, which should be about the size of a deck of cards. And they even put a deck of cards on the table next to a steak. But the steak that they show it next to is kind of probably an 18-ounce steak or 20-ounce steak, whereas a deck of cards would probably be a good 4 or 5 ounces of steak. So it was kind of a biased representation comparison there, which I thought was interesting. His first meal is an Egg McMuffin for breakfast, and he gets through that just fine. The second meal that they show, I forgot to take a note of if it was the same day or not, but it's kind of the infamous scene that I remember the movie for. He's in his car and he orders a double quarter pounder with cheese meal, and he goes through. I got the McGurgles and you got the Mick heart attack and all this type that he's talking about. He puts Mick in front of things, but it's not a time lapse, but they show you different time intervals of he's eating the food. He had to supersize it because one of the rules that he had in his 30-day quest, if the person gave him the upsell, would you like to supersize? He always had to say yes. So he shows the fries, and he's like, oh, look at all this food, what am I going to do, and this and that. So he's eating the burger, he's eating fries, and then one of the captions says 23 minutes later he shows the fries and he's like, I haven't even put a dent in this, and all this type of stuff. And it's one of those things that in my circle of people, between my brother, my friend Rory, and my people who have seen the movie, who Apartment Gaming is my brother. Actually, I have a comment up on screen right now. He was a lightweight. He actually gets physically ill at eating this double quarter pounder meal and proceeds to release it outside the window of his car at the end of the scene, which that scene stayed with me because of how unprofound that meal was. I mean, yeah, I mean, uh, a 48-ounce soda, which is what used to come with the supersize, is a lot of soda, and the fries looked pretty large, but a double quarter pounder with cheese is just it's an 8-ounce burger essentially. Um, Most places that you go nowadays, like if you go to a restaurant and order a burger, you're probably getting between 6, 7, 8 ounces, depending on what it is, for a decent sized burger. And most people can finish those in one sitting. So it was always funny to me that he had that reaction to the double quarter pounder meal because, I mean, it's not a very big meal, in my opinion. But I always love that scene because he talks about how as he's eating it, his stomach gets the McGurgles, and it's one of the that to me is a funny line. There's a scene that right after that where he orders a yogurt parfait. He's like, "Oh my god!" Like it's like the cutest thing ever. They find a hair, and he's like, "Oh, there's a nappy hair in this thing," and he proceeds to pull it out, and it's a pretty long hair, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty gross, but they don't tell you whether or not he eats it or not, or whether or not they just play it up for the camera because they're making a film that got it's an Oscar nominated film that was put in theaters all over the world. Then there's another kind of legendary part of the movie where they show you the guy who eats Big Macs every day, and this is one of the people that whenever you see any of these news exposés on the horrors of the fast food industry and whether you should eat or not, um, they'll always show you this guy because he eats 2 to 3 Big Macs every day, and he's thin as a stick. So it goes to show that like maybe there's a side of it that is actually hereditary, metabolic, or something that is not that you're not going to become obese by eating the food, even though logically it makes sense. At some point, eating 2 to 3 Big Macs a day is going to catch up with this guy. And I didn't look up if this guy's still around, but I'm sure he is. And if he isn't, I hope he didn't succumb to one of the things that you would get by eating Big Macs every day. They spend a decent portion of the film going to schools and talking about school lunches. And I think that's interesting as well. I have a young son in school. I've seen what the lunch menus look like, but I haven't seen what the lunches actually look like in comparison with like what I remember a school lunch to be. I don't actually remember the school lunches to be terribly unhealthy back in the day until I got to high school. When I got to high school, there was the traditional lunch line where you would get kind of your traditional, pizza. There was nacho days, which I think isn't the healthiest thing on the planet, but I think even looking at my son's school menu, it looks like they still do stuff like that. And I did go to a different school than my son goes to. It looks like we have somebody saying hi. Hi, Colt. Nice to see you here. But I didn't see that, but the other thing in my high school was they had a sandwich line where they would sell pretty much deli sandwiches, and I would get pastrami every time. Not exactly what I would classify as a healthy lunch, but all those lunches were also like I would say more expensive. I was working at my dad's store, so I had a little extra money, so I was able to afford a $3 or $4 sandwich as opposed to the $1.25 or 35 it was. I probably sound like one of those old men that like, oh, school lunches were, $1 back in my day, but that's not what I'm trying to do. But the film spends a lot of time looking at school lunches and looking at a case study of like government subsidies and things like that. And I think even now, it looks like a lot of the same type of cultural issues exist in the school lunch systems. So that's something that this film really didn't have put much of a dent in that whole thing. There was one thing where one of the lunch organizers or whatever says, we don't have soda, but we sell Gatorade, and things like that. I think we're at the point right now where with anything sugary, you want to try to limit that as much as possible at whatever age you are. And I'll get back to that in a second at the end of this, because the last scene is kind of where that goes. Then he's on the street, kind of he asks a bunch of people what's a calorie, and I thought this was actually a pretty interesting comparison of 2004 to whenever he filmed 2003, 2002 to 2024. We're a lot more conscious as a society, or at least as Americans, um, as far as what calories are and what should be sensible eating. Um, or at least my practice with it is um, after like right around this time actually, I was doing Atkins diet, low carb, and a lot of different other types of things to try to lose weight. Um, and the typical your calorie counting, that always was kind of the king in terms of you know all the metrics for health. So that he's on the street asking people, do you know what a calorie is? And people like, oh, does it have something to do with fat? Does it have something to do with your weight and all this type of thing? Nobody seemed to be able to pinpoint it until he gets to a scientist who says calorie is the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 liter of water 1 degree. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's what a calorie is. Unfortunately, though, that's the definition. I have to get in there with my science hat. That's the definition of a kilocalorie, which is 1,000 calories, which is essentially what the measure of a food calorie is. We're nitpicking a little bit and going into the nuance of the language between layman and scientist, but a calorie is not what she defined. A kilocalorie in scientific terms is what she defined. Then there's a scene where his girlfriend is pleading with him to try to go vegan, and he gives this whole thing about how ham is not as bad for you as heroin, and a lot of things that are like, yeah, I wouldn't even, I don't think you're even in the same ballpark with these things. Definitely not the type of thing that you're going to win an argument against somebody who's vegan and made that choice. But also interesting is how passionate she was about, him not eating meat. It's like, okay, if you guys live together, it's important for you to have that conversation. But also, like, what if he's Jewish, which I think he was, and you're Catholic or something? Are you ever going to get on the same page to be able to even figure that out? That's the type of thing that rang in my head as far as that goes. Then there were a bunch of scenes with doctors, and here was what I thought a really funny doctor thing was. And going back to school lunch, it looks like Jocelyn, who's watching, says lots of tater tots, milk, sloppy small pizza slices, an old apple. Yeah, that's about what my school lunches were. I also remember there used to be spaghetti days, and we had nacho days, and it was nothing special or spectacular, but for $1 something a meal, you can't exactly expect it to be. So we get to these doctor scenes where there's some misinformation and also just some funny commentary, which I think plays into what's happened with this film in recent years. We have a doctor who tells him his weight goes up, and she says, well, muscle weighs more than fat, so you probably lost some muscle and this and that. Again, you probably have heard that before, but 1 pound is 1 pound, regardless if it's muscle, fat, whatever it is. The volume that muscle takes versus the volume that fat takes are vastly different, which is where people get the misconception that muscle weighs more than fat. Muscle is more dense than fat because density is defined as mass per volume. So that's kind of where that is considered, what I consider misinformation. If you lose 1 pound, regardless if it's muscle or fat, you've lost 1 pound. It'll probably look different. 1 pound of muscle loss will probably be less noticeable than 1 pound of fat loss, depending on, where you are. If you're a 300-pound person, let's say 30 pounds, if you lose 30 pounds of muscle, you probably will look the same. Whereas if you lose 30 pounds of fat, you'll probably look considerably different, 10% smaller. Um, so I mean that's kind of that whole thing. But then here's the controversy part. So in recent years, it's come to light that Morgan Spurlock, and that especially at the time of the documentary, was like a crazy alcoholic. That he his he had some bad liver diseases and stuff like that. And I don't know the whole details, but that's what I heard talking to some people here and looking it up. The doctor looks at his blood panel, and they did like a lipid panel, and he's like, your liver function is obscene. He uses the word obscene. Um, and this is about 24, 25 days into the diet. And he says, if this is the type of thing that, eating fast food for 30 days, you just have to stop. And what's unclear in 2024 versus 2004, at the beginning, they do show him meeting with multiple doctors and going through his blood panels and all that type of stuff. But I don't know that they give you the baselines of what the liver functions were before and after and all that. They do tell you a lot, like the cholesterol was like very low. I think his cholesterol increased by tenfold by the end. I think it was like 20, one of the numbers, and was like 240 at the end, which is absolutely crazy. But also that's the type of thing that would happen if you were also drinking as well. You get this kind of domino effect of blood sugar and liver function and all that type of stuff that kind of all play together. So that's a whole interesting thing. But the fact that the doctor did what might have been completely naive to the fact that he was drinking also at the same time, was very very interesting, I thought. Then I thought that was a funny scene in terms of it being like a film. They use the Pusher Man song, and they're trying to frame it from the perspective of fast food is a drug. And over the years, actually, multiple other movies have come out kind of in similar vein to Supersize Me. One that I could think of is Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, where they essentially talk about juicing and how the sugar and corn is like the worst thing for you and all that type of stuff. The type of thing that you watch it for educational and entertainment purposes, but you can't take everything at face value, just like in Supersize Me. But the Pusher Man song goes into a transition into a whole thing about medical procedures, and they say there's no medical procedure that's available to cure diabetes. The only thing that actually makes an impact is gastric bypass. I actually personally know a lot of people who have had a lot of success with gastric bypass. The one thing I'll say, and now we're getting into a little bit of what could be construed as medical advice, and I'm not here to give you medical advice or fitness advice or anything. The one thing that's difficult with gastric bypass is that if the reason why you're eating or overeating is mental in nature, you may still do that. You just physically can't do that anymore, which could cause other issues. So there's a lot of pluses and minuses there. And they show you the visual of somebody, an obese, morbidly obese person going and having the surgery. And that's also kind of a little melodramatic. They play it. They have some, music in there, and, they're tugging at your heartstrings. We're getting to the point where we're at the climax of the movie, and they kind of want you to walk away with, the message of don't eat McDonald's often. And here's a funny, kind of ironic thing. One of the memes on the internet about McDonald's is about how the ice cream machine is always broken. He goes up to a drive-through and he orders, I think, a vanilla milkshake or vanilla something, and the woman tells him, "Oh, our ice cream machine is not working." So that's funny that became kind of legendary as an internet meme, kind of independent of the film, which is kind of, I think, fun. So then he does a voiceover for the ending of the movie, and one of the things he says, obviously I think he gained 24.5 pounds at the end of it, according to what they say. It took him 5 months to lose 10 pounds or something like that. But one of the things that he said that I thought was really interesting, which I might try to verify at some point when I have some time to do all the calculations, he ate more calories in 1 month than what you're supposed to eat in 8 years. That to me sounds like a sensationalized statement. Um, while I don't disagree that the calorie counts of some of the foods that he probably ate, especially if he supersized, are probably high and higher than you should eat in a normal day. In order to eat the calories you need in 8 years, it's that's a lot of calories. Yeah, I'm in my head right now. The numbers are kind of going, and I'm not going to take you guys there, but it's not. I don't think it's possible eating what he was eating in 1 month to reach that. It just that doesn't check out with me. But the one thing that he says that I think is kind of a good thing at the end is, maybe you're not going to, he calls out McDonald's, you're not going to talk to me. Maybe you're not going to do anything about this. But the one thing I would urge you to do is to do away with the 48-ounce sodas. And, I would say personally, one of the changes that I made around the time of Supersize Me is that I stopped consuming calories from things like soda, what they would consider empty calories, right? If I drink a soda, I'll drink a diet soda. I've never had a problem with diet. So that's kind of my vice. I love a nice diet fountain soda, but even with that, I don't need 48 ounces. You know, the whole dynamic of filling up a cup with enough ice to keep 48 ounces cold for enough time to drink it. You know, maybe if I do something really crazy and I go to 7-Eleven, once in a blue moon, you'll see me with a giant cup. I think the other day I went to Cumberland Farms here and I got the 32 ounce, which was still really big. And it took me a while. I think I drank it over the course of 7 hours. And at the end, it was not fizzy and watered down. So it's like, did I really enjoy that at the end? So I would say that's one thing I do agree with. But in terms of the impact of this film, to me, it definitely was one of those things where I really liked documentaries in the 2000s because there was Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. Then there was later on, I think closer to 2010, there was a documentary called Food Inc. And these were all documentaries that flooded the early streaming platforms like Netflix, and just were easy things to watch on a weekend. Another one that was kind of similar in vein to this was Bigger, Faster, Stronger, the Bell family from Poughkeepsie, New York. And that was kind of their expose on the bodybuilding industry and had kind of a spin with professional wrestlers. I think one of the Bell brothers was a professional wrestler. I think both of them were really into it. So that's another thing that came out of the impact of this film. Documentaries like that, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. I'm trying to think of some others. Like I said, Food Inc. is another one. Food Inc. was more of an expose on, the agriculture industry in America and government subsidies and things like that. There are others, and through the years, they've also talked about, you'll see it come up in the news a lot, monoculture and things like, gluten, and Monsanto and all that type of stuff, which I'm sure we can have another stream about another time. But in terms of just the whole impact of this, fast food in 2024 is quite a bit different than 2004. In 2004, it seemed to me like it was a lot more like the 90s in terms of, okay, we have our core menu stuff. Occasionally you'll see something new, but it's not really that often. Whereas now, I think fast food companies are struggling so hard to attract the more millennial audience that they come up with things that really don't even make a whole lot of sense when you think about it. An example: Burger King came out with these buffalo nuggets, and essentially they're just the same nuggets that they're tossed in the buffalo sauce. And I think there's a ghost pepper version and this and that. And these are the types of things that are like, okay, these are buzzwords that draw people in to, this type of stuff, but not really they're still just chicken nuggets. They're nothing special. Um, so that there's stuff like that. Then they have the same type of thing that they put in a wrap, which I think is like $3 or $4, which I think is trying to get people into more of a budget. That people they're trying to pull people who are more budget conscious to getting something like that. But no matter what, you still see on the menu the things that are their standard offerings. Like the Whopper is king at Burger King, no pun intended. They also have a Big King. Like I said, when I was at work, I would maybe once every month or so, or maybe twice a month, I would go to Burger King for lunch just because it was the only fast food place in the vicinity of my former job. Um, but yeah, uh, as far as McDonald's though, I still, my son they'll go to McDonald's a lot for like a chicken nugget um, meal, and that's another thing. People talk about how bad for you McDonald's is, but like a 6-piece chicken nugget, yeah, it's processed and it's got a lot of stuff in it, but the calorie count on the nuggets alone is not incredibly ridiculous. Like, even a 4-piece, I think is what he gets. But they'll go occasionally. But personally, I don't like the fries at McDonald's. A lot of people do like the fries. To me, I want something that is going to be able to sit for more than 3 minutes before they become inedible. McDonald's fries are just inedible the entire time. A couple more comments I want to highlight here in the stream. Mr. Tommy's Tube. I can give up fast food or soda. Can't do both. So hard for me. I mean, I'm kind of similar. I have to have a certain level of prepared foods by other people. I can't do all the cooking myself. I found myself recently unemployed, so now I'm trying to figure out how I can get ingredients to make kind of quicker things that are kind of comforting and also quick and easy. And I'm not in the kitchen for 100% of my time, so and also just trying to think of ways I can go get lunch for a few bucks and not have to worry about breaking the budget. So yeah, it's definitely something I consider as well. And it looks like Jocelyn's back with Forks Over Knives, which is another one of those documentaries that I remember watching probably about 10, 12 years ago. That's kind of another interesting thing. And Morgan Spurlock himself actually made a sequel to Supersize Me, which I did watch. I remember, I think it was about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, seeing a whole bunch of buzz around it. It was called Supersize Me 2 Holy Chicken. And that movie was about essentially making a new fast food restaurant that for chicken sandwiches that where everything is ethically raised, hormone free, and all that type of stuff. And I found out about it from the YouTube channel Healthy Junk Food. No longer together as a channel. I think they split, and now Julia is doing Healthy Junk Food and JP is doing the Where's JP channel. One of my favorite YouTube channels back in the day, by the way. But they did a collaboration with Morgan Spurlock where they brought him into he brought them into the restaurant and they got to try everything. And I remember watching Supersize Me 2, which I don't have, and just being like, this is nothing like Supersize Me. I don't understand. It's kind of a promotional vehicle for this pop-up restaurant concept that he had that never came to light, obviously. And that was interesting because that was optioned by YouTube Red, whatever the premium YouTube was 5-6 years ago. And they dropped it, and then he released it independently, which, it's not as profound a movie as Supersize Me 2. But if you're into movies, it's one of those things, you throw it on, it's fine. But sad to hear somebody passed away, especially somebody who, made a movie that, is in the zeitgeist in terms of fast food. This is one of those things, this cover even is iconic. You'll see that. There was a movie, what's the comedian's name? That was called Super High Me, where they recreated the same thing, and it was all marijuana joints in his mouth, and the whole movie was about him just getting crazy high. And that was a fun one, but it was also kind of ridiculous. Mr. Tommy's Tube is back. I did pull soda from my diet in 2011 after root canal, lost 30 pounds in 2 months, but that was temporary. Mr. Tommy's Tube, I'll tell you, coming from somebody who's lost over 100 pounds 3 times in my life now, I know how difficult it is to keep it off. And it's one of those things where, you got it figured out and then you don't. And, the next thing you know, you're a few pounds heavier, but, you got to keep your head up and, figure out what you need. I would say don't do anything drastic where you omit everything from your life, and try to find the joy in the things that you can and go from there. That's kind of how it goes. I mean, right now I'm kind of battling a few health things and trying to find a job, and also trying to keep myself on an hour to hour, minute to minute, day to day basis, happy and satisfied, and doing the right thing. So it's not easy, but it's one of those things. Definitely don't go on a 30-day McDonald's binge. That's probably not a good idea. Here I wasn't going to pull this on the screen, but I'm going to now because I have something similar to say. 226 now, not the press, but if you get to 170, you feel you look sickly. In 2003, actually, I think I went on the Atkins diet. I lost 100 pounds in 3 months. And from there, I went into what I called a high energy diet, which was extremely low calories. I'm not even going to tell you the number because it's ridiculous. And I was doing 2.5 hours of working out every day, 45 minutes of weights, and about an hour and 45 minutes of cardio. I would go to the gym, run for an hour, do weights, and then I would go on an elliptical for 45 minutes. This is in graduate school. I had a flexible schedule. I got down to 163.5 or 162.5. I don't remember the exact number. And if you look at that picture of me, the exact word that you have there, that's what I say. I look sickly. I was seeing a doctor last year who told me I had to bring my weight down to under 150 pounds. And I told him, absolutely not. I mean, I'd never agree to that. I kind of know what I have to do to get down to a healthy 220. I just have to do it. So that's where you go. Mr. Tommy's Tube, Atkins cuts all carbs. You need carbs in your body. I never felt it was a feasible one. Having done it 20 years ago, I would never go that extreme again. And between 2017 and 2019, I actually lost about 80 pounds working with a coach who was, doing my meal plans and all that stuff. So that was a lot more healthy, and I would say kind of sustainable. My problem with something like that is all mental. I get into kind of a rhythm where if I'm not sticking to it 100%, I kind of sabotage it in my mind, and it's hard for me to stay on track. I just have to remind myself that something is anything. That's where we go. But this was a lot of fun, kind of going through a lot of stuff that my experience with the movie Supersize Me, including going to the theater to see it and all that. If you are watching this, make sure you hit a thumbs up. And, if you enjoy it, subscribe to the channel. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you in the next one. I don't know what I'm doing next, but we'll probably be streaming within the next couple days. See you guys soon.